The entire island is now under the catastrophic effects of the third energy generator's overloading. It won't be too long before the entire island disappears as it's swallowed by the past and rapidly fills with dangerous creatures that threaten the lives of everybody left on Ibis Island. The rebel leader snatches the data disk from a wounded Gail, who is left shocked and confused at this betrayal. He reveals that he never trusted these Americans, and is enraged with Regina, who he blames for the death of all his men, to which Regina replies that it was their own stupidity that got them killed. Just as he is about to rush to attack her, his face suddenly changes into immense fear and begins to run away. From behind the agents, a horde of raptors emerge, attracted by the blood of Gail's and Kirk's bleeding wounds. The rebel leader gets on board the helicopter, and as he is about to take off, a desperate Gail pleads to take him along and get him off the island, but is ignored and mocked as the helicopter takes off into the sky. A sudden burst of lightning that strikes around them hits the vehicle, and the rebel leader is killed immediately as it bursts into a fiery explosion. As the raptors surround the group of Rick, Regina, Gail, and Kirk, their way out seems to be impossible. But another sudden strike from the lightning hits the side of a nearby hill and causes a destructive landslide that envelops the team as well as their hungry pursuers. Miraculously, Regina and Rick survived the landslide and were able to find each other. However, Gail and Kirk were cut off from them and found themselves in another area underground. With the original plan of flying out of the question with the storm going on, Gail asks Kirk if there are any other ways he knows that can get them off the island. Even though they both need each other at this point, Kirk understands his life is still in danger, with Gail as his only companion. He feigns tripping over, and in doing so seemingly grabs onto Gail to balance himself, but secretly activates his transmitter. Kirk reveals that there's an underground port that should still have a hovercraft that they can use to escape, as it leads directly to the sea that's used for emergencies. In a strange move, Kirk asks Gail if he even cares about his comrades, Regina and Rick, to which he replies he doesn't, and threatens Kirk to stay in line. All of this was heard by the other two agents, as it was being communicated unknowingly. This information gave them their next plan of action: rescue Kirk, who is being held hostage in a location they now know, and getting on board the hovercraft that would be their means of escape. Having memorized the facility map from the computer in the control room, Rick led the way to the underground waterway as the storm had seemed to settle. The two made their way back into the familiar location of the facility, but it was now flooded and difficult to move in, but they knew they couldn't allow themselves to fall behind Gail and lose Kirk. The further they went in, the deeper the water became, and as they swam through, they noticed that something was following them. A giant beast emerged from the water, the Mosasaurus. Regina pulled Rick to safety as the creature lunged for him. The dinosaur swam underwater and prepared itself for the next attack, while Rick picked up a steel bar and prepared to defend himself. In an act of defiance, he was prepared to accept the challenge and fight this beast to the death. The Mosasaurus lunged again, but was struck multiple times by Rick and was unable to eat its prey. But Rick's idea didn't go to plan when the beast grabbed hold of the bar and dragged him underwater, where it would have the advantage. Rick was able to free himself and the bar, and quickly did the only thing he could think of, which was to jab the creature in the eye. It thrashed around in pain, trying to remove the bar, but Rick held steady and ensured he would be victorious. Regina watched on helplessly, unable to do anything. Climbing onto its back, Rick removed the bar and began to slam it down repeatedly, over and over against its head until the blood poured. The skull cracked, and it eventually stopped moving. Rick celebrated this momentous achievement and cheered for the human race itself, before being cut off by Regina, telling him to hurry up as they still have a mission to complete, with time running out. Walking along the underground passage, Gail revels in the thought that the world will be enslaved by the power of the third energy, but is pulled back to reality when they notice the passage ahead is surrounded on each side by more dinosaurs that are lurking there, not appearing to be hostile, but watching them closely. Gail suggests taking another way around, but Kirk lifts himself up onto a beam and slowly walks across it, not attracting any attention from the dinosaurs, who seemingly saw him as no threat. Kirk made it all the way across to the safety of the doorway. Gail began this short but dangerous journey and remained calm. In a sudden act of defiance, Kirk threw a stick at Gail and in a state of shock, lost balance and collapsed into the water, which attracted the immediate attention of the dinosaurs who attacked him. As Gail fought off the beasts, Kirk made his escape. Against an overwhelming enemy, Gail was losing a lot of blood and tried frantically to find anything that could help him out of this situation. Only seeing one option, as his eyesight began to blur, he noticed a fire extinguisher and grabbed onto it, pulled the nozzle, and sprayed his attackers that suddenly let go as they swam away in fear. Kirk was searching for a way to contact Regina and Rick when he suddenly felt a hand grab his shoulder. He turned around in horror to find the man he had just attempted to kill standing there. In anger, Gail grabbed Kirk by the throat and demanded he lead him to the escape and not to try anything like that again, as he was kind enough to try and save him. Something wasn't quite right though. Something around him seemed oddly familiar, and taking a quick look around, he noticed something. A loose, exposed cable. The one that he and Rick used against the T-Rex when they fought it earlier. They were in the elevator, but the T-Rex wasn't any longer. As he pondered on where it could have possibly gone, their talking and fighting attracted it back, fully conscious and furious. The generator overloading in the comic is a larger and more dangerous version of what happened to the original third energy generator in the game. In the original, with Kirk's stubborn guidance, the group come up with a plan to overload the generator in an effort to stop the dinosaurs flooding into their time. When it does overload, as seen in the hovercraft ending, it destroys a large portion of the island that was caught in the blast zone. It's unknown whether it just simply destroyed it or sent that section back in time. Seeing the T-Rex caught in the blast and roaring in pain, I assume that it did indeed destroy it. However, the comic version expands the effects of the generator, as here Ibis Island is being slowly destroyed by the violent electrical storm, as well as the danger of its entirety being transported back in time. Given its size is far larger than the generator in-game, it makes sense that its effects would be a lot larger, and the new dangers give the comic version another layer of needing a hasty escape. The scene in which the Raptor horde emerges from behind the group reminds me of two moments from Dino Crisis 2. While they may not be intentional or even inspired by, I still find it interesting to note the similarities. The first is the introduction of Dino Crisis 2, where the Trat camp is ambushed, and the second is where Regina and Dylan are escaping, but their vehicle crashes and then find themselves surrounded. The idea that these raptors are led here because they smell the blood of Kirk and Gail's wounds is, in my opinion, pretty weak, as their wounds have not affected them from doing anything at all up to this point, so there's really been no focus on them for it to matter. Gail's bandages disappeared right after he'd put them on in the first issue, and his hand wound is never given a moment for the rest of the story, as he never has any problem doing anything despite having a knife through it. Kirk's gunshot wound has also never come up again, and he apparently hasn't even had any first aid on it as of yet, so he's just been bleeding this whole time, yet he's still pretty healthy. I know I'm probably being a little harsh on this one, but it's one of those moments where it feels like the writer wanted an easy transition into the next scene and just thought to use the blood reasoning. This also seems to apply with the storm that just so happens to give them an escape, as well as taking out every raptor, as not a single one of them is seen after the landslide. A helicopter being destroyed happens in the game, but due to a different circumstance. Instead of being blown up by an electrical storm when an antagonist tries to escape, in the game, it's a rescue helicopter that has come to pick up the team and Kirk, but is taken down by the T-Rex and explodes on impact with the ground. And just like the comic, it kills all who are on board and gives them one less avenue for escape. It's funny to note that the rescue helicopter that was in the game appeared when Gail was nowhere to be seen, and therefore he wouldn't have gone on it, at least not at that point. But in the comic, Gail is the only one who attempts to get on it before it's destroyed. If you take the hovercraft, in the ending in which they decide to abandon the mission, Kirk manages to escape from their custody. It can be safely assumed, because of one of the other endings, that he made his way to the underground heliport. It's unknown if Kirk ever made it off the island before the third energy generator exploded, making him potentially another antagonist who did try to escape via helicopter, but was unsuccessful. When the helicopter explodes, it doesn't just kill the rebel leader, it also likely destroys the third energy data disk that he had on him. In an unfortunate twist of fate, that makes a lot of what happened up to this point fairly meaningless. The rebel soldiers all died for nothing, and Gail betrayed his team, as well as his agency, and by further extent his country, and has nothing to show for it, unless he escapes with Kirk. The fact that the data disk is unknown for most of the game, despite being the mission's true objective all along, makes it a somewhat interesting detail. Because it's only revealed in the ending where Gail dies, 3 of the 4 endings leave the player unaware it even exists, making it feel almost non-existent. The comic destroying the disc makes it a very familiar situation, albeit in another way. The grappling hook has been seen in a new way, not just for climbing up vent shafts, and now we have the transmitter given an interesting plot point. Kirk uses it to secretly communicate with Rick and Regina to stealthily tell them that he is alive, is with Gail, is in danger, as well as letting them know where to rescue him and escape from. Such a nice detail that adds a cool part to the story in a believable way. I don't think it would have worked in the game, however, if Kirk was in a situation like this one, as when they use the transmitters, it emits a noise as well as has a bright green and red light, which I feel would have been very noticeable, especially in a dark underground walkway.
Rick here. I'm in.
It's also an interesting mirror to the events in game when Gail uses a transmitter to secretly track Kirk, as well as find their means of escape. Gail takes Kirk prisoner several times during the course of the game, the first in carrying out room B1, and the second when Kirk attempts to kill Regina in his personal lab. He remains professional, but doesn't let his emotions get the better of him when Kirk tries to bait him, and always keeps focused on the mission. Even when his life is in serious danger, he still does what he needs to, from saving Kirk's life at his own expense, and planting a tracker on him before he passes out from his wounds. In the comic, he's taken him prisoner, but as a villain, threatening to kill him and only keeping him alive for his own purposes, as well as physically assaulting and intimidating him. For a brief panel, we get to see the hovercraft passageway, which is a location from the game. In this version, it's a lot cleaner looking, being more metallic grey rather than industrial brown, seems a lot more organised, and has 2 walkways on either side of the craft. But it still retains the stairway connecting to a small overhead bridge, and the large 3E painted on the wall. Rick is able to memorize the map of the facility from his time scouring the database for the third energy data to download. We can see a visualization of the facility map and is somewhat similar to the one featured in the game, but with obvious differences. It's needless to say, but it's likely this map isn't accurate to any place in the actual story of the comic, and certainly isn't accurate to the one in game. Once again, they have introduced another dinosaur species that wasn't present in the original Dino Crisis, but was in the sequel, and that being the Mosasaurus. In Dino Crisis 2, these creatures try to attack Regina when she is wearing the diving suit as she makes her way through the underwater facility. In the comic, it is the large dinosaur that attacks Rick and pulls him underwater. Later on, we see some similar looking creatures that the comic also refers to as Mosasaurus. Now, I'm not a dinosaur expert, but I think calling them the same creature is a little odd given that they are pretty distinct in appearance. The Mosasaurus was large, had flippers and a different head shape, while these ones walk on land, have large claws and are much smaller, more resembling something like a Komodo dragon. If you know what species this could be, please let me know. The one part about this whole issue that I have an issue with, no pun intended, is when Rick decides to beat the Mosasaurus to death with a steel bar. I understand that it's a life or death or kill or be killed situation, but the way he goes about it just seems very out of character for him. His in-game counterpart barely has any action scenes with dinosaurs, so his fighting ability is never shown. The only moments we do see this are with the 2 ending cutscenes where he either fires a missile at the T-Rex or when he drops a large bomb on it. There's also the scene where Tom saves his life by throwing him out of the way of a raptor's attack, but it's unknown if Rick killed the raptor or Tom did before he died. Most of the game, Rick is only seen in places where his computer abilities are put to work, but also heard when he is using those same abilities and assisting you over the radio. To have him suddenly not be his brains overblown personality is a little jarring. I understand that it creates a good moment and shows more of Rick's skills as an agent, but this just seemed so weird to me personally. Gail has a very odd way of thinking about how he will use the third energy generator should he succeed in his plans. Enslaving the world seems like quite a big ambition, given that the machine right now is only capable of bringing things back and forth through time, and somewhat has a teleportation capability. I suppose there are ways he could use it in a capacity that gives him advantages in wars and special missions and such, but it doesn't seem likely he'll be able to do that. He's one man, doesn't have any kind of military power, based on his joining the now defunct rebel group. If Regina and Rick manage to escape, he will be wanted by the US government for treason and placed on the most wanted terrorist list, and the only person he has to work with is Kirk, who is his prisoner and will more than likely not have access to the tools, staff, and funding he needs to rebuild the third energy generator. This comment was most likely Gail celebrating early, thinking that his escape will be easy and the world will bow down to his new power. Sort of shows how insane he is at this point too, and how different he is from his in-game counterpart. To the original Gail, the mission was everything, and his loyalties lay with his agency and his country. But here we have Gail as a completely desperate psychopath who has narrowly survived several fatal situations and is planning a serious planetary domination campaign while trapped on an island with the one man whose in-game counterpart is the actual psychopath. Having the T-Rex seemingly get killed only to reappear suddenly later on actually happens twice in Dino Crisis, one mandatory and the other depending on which choice of escape you've made. While preying on some unfortunate workers of the Ibis Island facility, the T-Rex made its way down to the B3 level, and upon seeing Regina, lunged at her but knocked itself unconscious after striking a large electrical generator. It's not seen again until one of the final escape sequences, when it chases you down a large passageway on the way to the underground heliport, where it's finally killed upon the group leaving Ibis Island. But if you chose to take the hovercraft to make your final escape, then upon entering the port, Regina will cautiously approach the T-Rex, which has somehow found itself down here and has been wounded, again appearing dead, only this time more convincingly with a large amount of blood around its head. It later wakes up and a boss fight ensues as it chases Regina around the port before chasing the hovercraft and getting caught up in the explosion of the third energy generator overloading. Join me next time as we dive into the final issue of the Dino Crisis Manhua, Grand Finale. Thanks for watching, and if you found it interesting, please give a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more.